I'm not sure.
Linus.
Yeah.
Sorry. You must tell me to go. I'll take you.
So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for those that have patiently been waiting online while we were dealing with some technical issues. My name is Amumoloto, and I am your host on Couch Conversations. And I'd like to also give a special welcome to our in-person audience, as well as everyone who's joining us online. Thank you for taking time out to be with us this evening. And today we are joined by two incredible leaders. But before we get to that, I just want to say this platform is for African leaders. It's for sharing wisdom. It's for sharing our stories. It's for celebrating our achievements. And we get together every Thursday, every second Thursday of the month. And we have different leaders that come and they share their wisdom and stories. And we work away feeling very enriched. And so this evening, we are talking diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And I mean, it is Heritage Month in Mzansi. So we bring all these cultures together, Sesotho, Xhosa, Afrikaans, Chivenda. All these cultures come into the workplace, and then there's magic that happens because either we celebrate our differences, but if we don't, then things go south and there's conflict. So these interesting leaders and dynamic speakers are going to be sharing with us their insights in terms of what they've observed in the workplace and what's been really happening since a few adjustments have been made legislatively, as well as implementation at organizational level. So to share some insights, it would be not fitting for me to talk a little bit about our wonderful leaders this evening. We are joined by Lana Jackson, transformation specialist extraordinaire. And we have Mabi Sinkomindaba, and he is our leader in the public sector. But before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about these leaders. Okay, so when Lana speaks, she empowers, she inspires. And when this queen speaks, the audience listens. She creates workplaces where people thrive, where organizations succeed, because ultimately she's concerned about creating future workspaces that are created with intention and care. And Monwabisi, on the other hand, is ever ready. This dynamic speaker can take the mic at the drop of a hat and keep his cool. He can speak to any diverse audience and look like he's just gliding on water. So this evening, we are very privileged to have Lana and Monwabisi. Both of you, welcome to Couch Combos.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Anna. Thank you.
So shall we talk some stats? Because I mean, we can't talk, diversity without the numbers. So this is interesting. I think it was 31st of July last year, the Daily Maverick put out a report, which was rather interesting. So according to them, 25% of the South African workforce is skilled. And I'll give you the numbers just now. The report goes on to say, as of the first quarter of 2023, the country had 4.1 million skilled workers, 7.5 workers who were semi-skilled, and then there were 4.6 that were unskilled. Now imagine all these people that are coming from different backgrounds and different walks of life, and they now need to work together and make magic happen. Of course, things can go really well, or maybe not so well. So let's start at the top. Please share with us, what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why is it important for organizations to actually diversify their workforce? So we'll start with you, Lana.
Okay, so I think for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think people often think of it either as one word or one concept. It's a completely different, right? Diversity is who I have in my workforce. Inclusion is how do I invite them to the table, right? And then equity speaks to how do I meet them for where they are, right? So I think this is a wonderful analogy of dance that Bernard Meyer uses in terms of expressing the the knowledge around diversity, equity, and inclusion as an analogy. But something that I wanted to bring into the table is just a bit of perspective, which is by Dr. D.L. Stewart. And he introduces the concepts, and then he says diversity asks the question, who is in the room, right? So who is represented over there? And equity responds, who is trying to get into the room but can't? Whose presence in the room is under constant threat of erasure? And then inclusion asks, has everyone been heard? And he throws another element into that, which is justice. And he says, justice says, whose ideas won't be taken as seriously because they aren't in the majority. So diversity, equity, and inclusion intertwined. It's a journey. It's around making sure that everybody is feeling seen, heard, and respected around the table.
Yeah. And actually, one person said it's not a destination,
Yes.
but rather it's a process. And I think when we think of it as a process, we can tweak certain things that work in the process.
Absolutely.
But if it's a destination, we have arrived. We have
We have
all
arrived.
women, we have
Yes.
people with disability,
Absolutely.
we have, and so we are sorted. Okay. Well, Nobisi, what's your take on DE&I and why it's important in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Armin. Thanks, Anna. It's amazing how you've combined us. I don't know where you got it from. Because
I know people, other people.
how Lana has explained it, compliments.
Yeah.
I don't need to say anything about what she has said.
Yeah.
I'm just going to speak on, as complimenting what she just mentioned now.
Yeah.
Because to me, diversity is the presence of difference. And I think that is what she has just spoken to. And I think what's important is that when you speak about it within the workplace, it's the presence of difference within. So with me, I'm going to take it, drill down, because she has given us the overall how it looks like and what it is. For me, I'll drill down and say it's a presence of race. Now, it's a presence of gender diversity. It's a presence of culture. It's a presence of ethnicity. So that's all of that. And what it means is that, and here she has used equity. I'm not going to spoil her words because that's, for us, for me, equity empowers the work that we do as leaders within that space. As you were there this morning, I spoke to leaders in another organization where we were talking about issues of equity and all the pieces of legislation that empowers the space of diversity. And I said, how I wish there was not any legislation to empower us. Because diversity is something that we are born with, because it speaks to dignity and everything. So I said, I wish we could not have this legislation and this equity. So I think that's about it. So for me, what's important is that a diversified workforce is very important because it promotes and it's a fertile ground for innovation. It creates a space that allows for innovation, especially in the workplace, because we come from different backgrounds. And I think it's about recognizing the importance of being different more than being the same and drawing the strengths out of being different. So that's basically how I interpret the concept of diversity.
So what I like that you said, which is also very important, and we can't exactly steer away from it. In some cases, things need to be legislated. When you look at the history of our country and how some people were excluded, it was necessary that they get included and it's actually legalized or it's mandated. Because if not, the polarities continue.
Right.
So I mean, when I look at the EE Act or even affirmative action and some of the views that people have about it being reverse racism, we need to stop and actually say, what is affirmative action? And I mean, I'll just speak for myself, but my understanding of affirmative action within the EE Act, the Employment Equity Act, is that you have people who are skilled and qualified, but they're previously from groups that were not or given opportunities. So these groups could be Black people, could be women, could be people living with disabilities. And so when you recruit with that in mind to say, how do I include these people? How do I make sure that these skilled, qualified, and competent people are part of the workforce? Because they too have a contribution that they can make. And yet there's still a narrative that EE and AA are reverse racism. So what are your thoughts, or how would you like to respond to that narrative without putting yourself on the spot? Wow, whoever feels most ready.
Because right now you're talking to Section 20 of the Employment Equity Act, which definitely addresses the issues of we use it to implement affirmative action,
Yeah.
which is addressing the imbalances of the past. So yes, I agree with you. We need legislation in order to ensure that we are serious about this, to ensure redress and justice. And I think it's all about justice. So what I've, as a seasoned HR person, in terms of my interpretation of that, I would like to say the employment equity just simply clarifies what programs should be put in place and what is in place in order to address these issues and imbalances of the past. So that is, it just empowers us. And I think it's very unfortunate that people who sees it as a reverse racism, it is not what it seeks to address, because it's about ensuring that all individuals have got equal opportunity. And Lara has mentioned, it says there are those that are supposed to be there or could be there, but have been locked outside.
Exactly.
So what the Act does, it unlocks that. And it just creates injustice. I mean, it just unblocks, it speaks to injustices of the past, and simply that. And in fact, I always say this when I talk to leaders and directors and managers, to say, nowhere in the Act, because that's the misinterpretation of the Act, nowhere in the Act does it say do not appoint this one and appoint this one. It does not say that. But what it says is create opportunities for those who are not privileged or who are from the disadvantaged backgrounds. That's what it says.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say I'm not sure where the concept of reverse racism comes from, because nowhere in the law does it say reverse racism. It doesn't say that. I mean, our Constitution, Chapter 2, speaks about all the rights of, the human dignity and everything. So if we could embrace Chapter 2 of the Constitution and read it together with the components of the Act and in fact, the spirit of the Act. In fact, people need to read it. The spirit. What is the spirit of the Act?
And I think everybody else, before Lana, you give your response, go and read Chapter 2, okay? And the spirit. And then also read the EE Act in the spirit of us moving forward. I'm just teasing. But Lana, what are your thoughts on this whole idea that EE and AA are reverse?
So very similar sentiments shared from my colleague. I think we need to understand the historical context that we're working with within South Africa, right? And I think it's more just adding on and elaborating a little bit on what Mona has already alluded to, is the fact that reverse racism, the acts were set out to redress the inequalities of the past. And so it's providing opportunities for those that have not had opportunities.
Correct.
And the Employment Equity Act, which equity refers to meeting people where they are and getting them to where they need to be. I think we need to do the spirit, I like that, the spirit of the Act and the spirit of that work is redressing. Unfortunately, we've still got an incredible way to go in terms of transformation. And so the legislative frameworks helps us navigate that. It guides the way that organizations should think about things, how they should be applying themselves, how to not exclude individuals from spaces. And so, in fact, the Act speaks to just leveling out the playing field for the change.
And it's interesting that you've spoken about inclusion, right? Because when we look at the workforce as it stands, we don't have that many people who are differently abled. We don't actively seek out competent, qualified people who have disabilities, because there's this idea that if you have a disability, you're not capable or you're not able to deliver at the level that someone who is considered normal, I don't know what that means, normal would be able to. And so I was reading a little bit and I came across this article in the Inclusion Hub, and it was titled The Importance of Disability Representation in Leadership. And this was obviously a US-based study, but this was last year, 24th of August. And they were saying out of the 451 companies that took part in the study, and some of them are Fortune 100 companies, some of them are Fortune 500 companies, only 6% of the people that were serving on the company board identified openly as having a disability. And so I'm thinking, if transformation is slow, at that level, how do we expect everyone else at an implementational level to take this on and say, you know what, we are going to turn things around? So in terms of what you've seen, are there certain patterns in the workplace where inclusion has deliberately included those who have disabilities or maybe are differently abled? Yeah.
So I think that work requires a whole construct breakdown in the sense that there's still fears around the inclusion, there's miseducation around inclusions of persons with disabilities. There's an incredible amount of work that needs to be done. Just looking at the Commission for Employment Equity report, on every single occupational level listed, there's less than 1.1% representation of persons with disabilities. And that is to do with education, it's to do with understanding the nature of the individuals that we're working with, it's breaking the stigma around disability. So we've got a long way to go. I think the targets that come into play, the 2%, it's not enough. It's not enough to shift the needle.
Yeah.
It's not enough to be able to transform the workforce.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, along with the work of not only people with disabilities, but also just people from the LGBTQIA plus community.
Right.
How do we make sure that they are included in spaces, right? And across all levels of the organization. An interesting exercise that we did some time ago in a corporate that we worked with was Dinner in the Dark, which allowed the executive team to actually participate in eating food and having a full course meal in the dark, right? With the blindfold on. And just the things that came out there was this almost this shame, almost about like what I take for granted, my privilege about being an able-bodied individual, and how do I make space for those that are not like me. So I think to one of Lisa's point earlier on as well, we speak around race, gender, etc., but there are so many other intersections of the dimensions that we of diversity that we bring to the table. And so it's about understanding what is our own prejudice and bias around not including those individuals in the space. Yeah. And if we can't, and sorry, then how do we become allies for those individuals? How do we become the voices that bring them into the conversation?
And create that inclusion. And before you respond, Mona, I just looked at a stat yesterday that said 600,000 people in South Africa use sign language. And yet, we don't take into account that some of us need to just sign to say hello and thank you, because we take it so for granted. We assume that everyone is able to speak, and yet there are those that actually would benefit from us recognizing their language, which would be sign language. So in your case, what are the patterns that you've seen in terms of inclusion for differently abled people?
Something in deep sight.
Yeah.
I think my work, where I am, and the organization that I serve, exposes me to different challenges and opportunities that speak to fostering a workplace that is inclusive, not only for us as an employer in this case, even for the clients that we serve. So I'm privileged to serve in the transversal committee that deals with how we as an employer, where I am, are looking at our clients that we service in terms of how do they access the services that we offer and that we render to them. So there's a committee that just deals with it. And I have learned so much serving in that committee in terms of the dynamics, even the definition of disability on its own. I mean, there was one speaker in one of the sessions I went to who said to us, why is it that even when you look at at disability and in terms of the signage, I mean, I've got a long list of things that I can talk to, and we can take this session could be 2 years. But I'm saying there's the signage. If you look at the signage, they say, but why is it a signage of a person with disability only is used to be a person in a wheelchair? Does it mean that as persons with disabilities, we are only confined to wheelchairs? We can't do anything. So even that on its own, it was a light bulb moment for me to say, well, I didn't realize that how persons with disabilities see that, to say, why are they associated with a wheelchair all the time? Because disability has got a huge spectrum.
Absolutely.
I mean, these days we talk about neurodiversity.
Exactly.
And in terms of neurodiversity, that spectrum has got autism, has got so many things which are invisible to the eye. So those are some of the dynamics that and the patterns that we see in terms of how we tend to be ignorant in terms of how we define even this concept of a person with a disability.
Yeah.
I mean, look around the workplaces. How do we respond to a person who needs sign language,
Yes.
but they can't get a service from you? How do they respond to a siren when there's emergency if they can't hear?
Yeah.
How do they, all of those little things, the infrastructure, the availability of infrastructure to service the people is what I've seen as some of the important aspects that we as organizations and as a people need to take care of. I mean, sometimes in other organizations, there'll be clocking devices that are only at a certain level, only meant for people that are at a certain height. And then, all of those things, how do these people access training? For instance, these days we've got training that happens on MS Teams, on Zoom. Do you all assume that everybody can listen to Zoom?
Yeah.
Everybody can watch, all of those things. So that's just the issues that I'm and the limitations that due to the work that I do have exposed me to such. Say, the disability on its own is very wide. And I think another important aspect is I think we need continuous awareness around these matters because we think we know it better than those that are living with a disability. And those networks are very important. So the patterns again, they come around. Do we have enough networks? How do we go out there and understand persons with disabilities? So and one of the focus areas in the space that I operate in the company is around disability management. So that shows commitment to the organizations to how do you manage disability as a spectrum. I mean, without a spectrum, but I can talk the whole day.
Yes, you can tell. As you're speaking, I'm reminded of a sensitizing session that we had in retail. When I was in retail, there was a time when they were intentional about including people living with disabilities, including those who are using wheelchairs, but others who are differently abled as well. And I remember they had this drive within the organization to say we're sensitizing people, especially at store level, because these were also people who were geared to get integrated at store level. And it was more of, we want you to understand that when this person comes, don't pity them and don't think that they're not able. Rather allow them, and if they ask for help, then step in. And I think that's the biggest mistake that we make as differently abled people ourselves. We assume that if someone is struggling, shit.
And I'm going to have to comment on that.
Please comment.
Please, because this is a subject that is close to me. It's very important. It's awareness. I mean, whoever is watching right now, they should go back and check in the organization.
Yes.
How much is their organization thinking about persons with disabilities?
Yes.
If I was working in an organization, saying that in a municipality or in a government or in public works or anything that supplies infrastructure, I wonder if there is an agenda item that says when we do our spatial planning, our designs, our parks, our recreations, our halls, our stadiums, to what extent do we involve persons with disabilities to be able to be part of the design concept and give their input? Do we have those, or do we just think like, they need a wheelchair, a ramp? I mean, I've been in situations where people are saying even that ramp on its own, for most instances, doesn't cater. They will put a ramp, which is, or I'm not sure what you call it, a rail that only allows for a person who is operating on his right hand or her right hand, not on the left. So all of those things, we think we've done it because we think we know them more than they do themselves. So that's a pattern to keep it. Do we involve them in all the planning? Are their voices heard? And all of this. So those are the parts of awareness. I mean, we've got issues of invisible disabilities. Like a person wants to take leave in the workplace. And they're asked, but
what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Don't look. What's wrong with you? You don't look well. It's because we think disability is only visual. So because mental state on its own, and in fact, me and you are going to be disabled. Did you know that?
Oh, tell us.
Shortly.
Tell us.
As you age, you're going to need a stick to walk if you're lucky. You're going to need you want to be able to run. Your eyesight is going to go bad. You're going to have dementia. You're going to have all of those things as you go older. Everybody is going to be disabled at some
Differently
point.
able. So
sorry, yes.
So here's the thing for everybody
able.
else. I'm going to throw this in there as a bonus. Look at the Blue Zone series on Netflix. It talks about things that we can do to prevent or to slow down the aging, because we can't prevent it.
Yes.
The aging that is, but we can be very conscious about how we age.
Yes.
And so things like resistance training or the diet that we eat, how we manage stress. And I know we digress, but just thought I should throw it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think just to go back to when we were speaking about inclusion, I read an article by Fred Starwitz, who is a strategic executive advisor. He's based in Houston, Texas. And in his post that he put on LinkedIn, he said those who oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion need to evaluate their values, ethics, and integrity. And then on the post, he goes on to pose quite a few questions, but there were two that particularly stood out for me, and I wanted to just share those and get your views on this. So the first one he says is, what makes you the arbitrator of what's right and wrong in the world? And then the second one he says, what makes the way that you look, think, and act the global norm? And I know that this comes from a certain maybe group, a certain view, a certain outlook, but what are your thoughts to say those who oppose D&I need to go back and evaluate what their values are, and they need to evaluate what their ethics are, they need to evaluate what their integrity is. Because ultimately, when you think the way that you look and act and think is the right way, you are saying that everyone else is wrong. And so what gives you that right to think you have that much power to decide what is right and what is wrong?
Yeah, so I think when reading through, when listening to that quote, it really it challenges us to check our own biases, right? So if the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is hard for you, what is it that you're struggling with? If you introspect, what is it that's making it hard for you? And I think for me, the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is underpinned by your values, your ethics, and your integrity. And so, so just listening to that, I was just going, and we find those hard conversations that people do not necessarily agree with this work, or why now this additional piece of work to consider. Why not? Right? Isn't it the model thing to do? Sometimes you engage with people and they say, why are we still looking for executive buy-in and sponsorship for this work? It's because we're out of sync. We carry our own biases, our own prejudices, and so we navigate the world with that lens on. And so through that, we exclude individuals. So for me, that was just the one doesn't go without the other.
Sure. And you're touching on the issue of values. I mean, values, they direct who we are.
Absolutely.
I think our behavior, because our actions and everything are based from stuff from the behavior. So what I would like to say is that I do actually agree with him, because in my view, when we recognize that diversity, inclusiveness, equity, and all of that, they are not just meant to be corporate strategies.
Absolutely.
And I always say when I talk to leaders and directors and everything, to say, once you talk values, it's not something that when you get to the doorstep of the employer, you start having values. And then when you leave, then you drop the values, and then you go. So because I think that's very important for me when I drive these programs, to say it's the values that I'm talking to right now in this session. It has. In fact, I always say in Xhosa, sidla ngokuthi ufaka umsasane empumulweni yehagu. When you put a golden ring in the nose of a pig. I'm so sorry for lack of a better word, audience. What are you doing? So, for instance, you can have those beautiful values, but if they are plugged in a damaged person or a damaged system, they won't mean anything. So that's why I'm saying, masingabi ilahagu. that will only go to work to get that ring,
Mm.
and when it leaves, it drops it at the gate, and it becomes that harbor again.
Yeah.
So, for lack of a better word, put it. So I'm just saying it shouldn't only end there. So that's what is important about the values, because our commitments for diversity must be driven
Absolutely.
by the values. And if we have to drive diversity, we have to instill and embed the values to our organizations and, of course, to our employees. So I think that's it. So resistance to these, then, of course, they stem from what you've just said, Alana, biasness and all of those things.
Yeah.
So to me, values are very instrumental. So yeah, I resonate with that sentiment, and I think leadership buy-in, which is what you're saying, again, is driven by the values.
Absolutely.
So for me, values are a fundamental driver of any initiative in any organization.
Yes, they're at the core.
They are at the core. So I think that they're very important. So that's my response in terms of that. Yeah.
I think just listening to both of you, I mean, that some of these statements can make people very uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And so we need to question if the people that we are with are comfortable with this, then there's something wrong. Comfortable with excluding that is, and comfortable with not being intentional about diversifying their viewpoints, diversifying the people that they work with. So when people become too comfortable with sameness, then we need to start questioning whether we are in the right circles. Because we need to be able to speak about these things in a setting where people go, ooh, I think I actually do have a bias towards people with disability. Or actually, I didn't understand it from your viewpoint because I'm not a female. So I don't know what it is to sit in a boardroom where there's only males. And each time you express a view, you are either labeled as emotional, or it's not rational enough, it's not technical enough, whatever the situation is, or whatever your experience is. So we need to also evaluate our circles to say, if my circle and the people that I interact with on the regular are just comfortable with the status quo and the way things are, then we need to go back and revisit. How do we create continuity in our own spaces? Because this is not just something that we should be championing in the workspace, but how do I model that for my family, for my children, for my friends who might not necessarily see this as an important thing, because they're like, well, you know, we all kind of okay, but what about those people that are left out, either because of our actions?
And that's why I say when I draft these programs of DI, I ask the question like self. You need to understand who you are, self, and then we talk to the social awareness. Of course, social awareness is driven by the social cultural experiences that you have, and we can't separate them. They are together. So self-awareness is very important as part of the driver of the values of diversity and inclusiveness. Understanding that we're doing it because it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do.
Especially my fundamental is always dignity. So if you can start with dignity and respect, which is inherent, which is we are born with. I think this could be a better world.
Absolutely.
No, we'll keep striving for that better world, because I can tell you now, we are still miles away from where we could be as humans, because I think we are designed to compare at different levels. You know, you look at the other person and you already start to see how their differences compare to otherness, right? Their differences compared to you. And instead of embracing that and saying, oh, she thinks this way, she has this viewpoint, and she looks different, that must be good. Let's see what she can add. Curiosity, what can she or he add? We look at that and we go, they're different, I don't like it, and so I'm taking a different route.
I think sometimes it's about replacing the judgment with curiosity, with valuing of differences, because we so easily can engage someone for the very first time. I see you, I form a perception of you, and I create judgment. Instead of actually getting to know you and understanding your perspective and working with it. So it is really important that we take stock of how we are navigating things, because else, if we don't stop it, it's just going to continue perpetuating the cycle.
And I think we look at diversity, like you were saying, at very superficial levels.
Absolutely.
What we see immediately, the race, the gender, many other things. But then there's so many other layers that if we took the time to get to know the person, we'd actually see we need diversity, we need differentness, or we need differences so that we can actually become stronger as a team and as an organization.
Yeah.
You know, I love Africa in terms of the Ubuntu.
Yes.
I mean, if you can start to embrace the concept of Ubuntu.
Yeah.
You know, Ubuntu, I mean, right now, let's say at universities and all the research books, how powerful that concept is. You know, and how we could, there's this, even the Zulu greeting.
Yeah.
Sawubona.
Yes.
That's the greeting that,
Yes.
it's a powerful greeting ever.
Yeah.
Because it says, I recognize you. Yes, I
Acknowledge
see you.
you.
I acknowledge you.
Yeah.
Zulu greeting to me is the best greeting ever had in Africa.
Then we must be Zulu greetings. That's what we must be. We must be Zulu greetings.
Yeah, thank you. That's good.
Yeah. And I think just, as I think about this, I'm also just drawn to ask you what some of the noticeable shifts are, especially when we're talking about leaders.
Yeah.
There's some leaders who are very much pro this and they understand why it's important, but there are those that are pushing back. And so what is it that you've noticed in the spaces that you operate, in the spaces where you advise, in the spaces where you consult? Are there pushbacks from leaders, especially those that sit at very strategic levels and they make decisions and they see this as another tick box exercise? Oh yeah, we need to make sure the scorecard looks right. Or is it that people are actually embracing this and they're saying, come on team, we need to make sure that this is part of our DNA as an organization. When you're looking for a new recruit, you intentionally seek out someone who would bring a different flavor, a different essence in the team. So are there shifts that you've noticed, and what are those shifts looking like?
So I think if I speak to my own experience, the shifts is definitely coming from connecting and engaging, educating individuals. I feel like just through the empowerment of people around the narrative of diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's been a shift, because I think there is the common misconception that DI is BE. Right?
Oh, okay.
So often people go, oh, so it's one and the same, and it's black.
White,
Yes,
colours.
yes. We try to, and then this realization to go, oh, it is different, right? It's asking about equity, it's asking about inclusion, it's asking. So I think for me, the biggest shifts I've seen in the spaces is this almost enlightenedness around what this could actually mean and the value of it. And so you get comments like, if I didn't go on this journey, I would not have thought of this differently. So it's this, the people literally come in and they go, I did not know that. I've learned so many new things. I now understand the importance of inclusive language, of utilizing my pronouns, of understanding the intersections of that diversity that people come to the table. That, I mean, often I do a call and I say, hi, my name is Lana, my pronouns are she, hers. And my daughter was in the car one day with me and she said to me, and her pronouns is also mom.
Yes, mom.
So I was like, yes, because there's layers of who I am. And so the work, I think, and you get pushback, don't get me wrong, but I think the work that we have been doing has been shifting people's perspective around this work. And there's actually great excitement about the possibilities that exist with it. And sometimes people sit with the discomfort of, this doesn't necessarily align to my religious beliefs, right? And so we have those conversations, and we also acknowledge that this work isn't cookie cutter. So I can't put one plaster on and go, this is going to solve for everybody. It really is about connecting and engaging with people where they are and taking them on the journey. And that for us has been the biggest. Yes, there's another one that we've managed to talk to. That's the
light bulb just went on.
The layers are coming off slowly but surely. And that's because you use education as that tool, right? And it's relational. It isn't a talk down to this is what we know. It's a relational engagement that allows people to shift perspective. And also say, so why do you believe that? Let's talk about it.
Pulling out of those opinions and views.
Sure. Yeah, when you talk about the shifts, I'm trying, because you're putting now back to the day-to-day where my hands get dirty.
No pun intended.
It's reminding me, recently I was talking to the managers and I was reporting to my director at some point about the observable changes that I've seen in the space, because we're running a particular campaign in the organization that I work in. That's just one. That campaign is just, it's amazing the work that it has done in terms of shifting the perceptions of provocation. Because when we run D&I interventions in organizations, especially in this country, especially because of the social cultural backgrounds and the actual cultures that the organizations have created and the institutions have created for themselves outside the social spaces. And they, when I went to those spaces, I remember very well, I would go in and I would be seen as someone who's here to provoke us.
Yes.
To provoke who's here to destabilize the culture. I remember one of them said to me, "There you go again, coming to destabilize our culture with these topics of yours, these things of yours. You want us, you want to control how we live, how we greet each other, how we things that are." I remember in another session somebody told me that things that I don't like. I mean, why am I supposed to accept things that are against my religion? I said, no.
Yes.
It's not about, I mean, nobody says in the D&I space, drop your religion,
absolutely.
drop your belief system, it says pull together those and find strength and find what works for you in it. And if it doesn't work for you, just keep your lane, basically. But in terms of that, it's about how this change from the perception of provocation have shifted into a sense of behavioral change and saying we do these things because, wow, a light bulb moment. So I think that's the part, especially the provocation part, because when you meet with people, they feel like as a D&I practitioner, you are there to dismantle their beliefs. You are here, especially with us, the most important, the African social cultural environment. Who destroy it. I'm saying I'm here to enhance actually Ubuntu. I'm here to enhance it, to say be proud, be bold, but at the same time respect, be inclusive in it. Make other people want to be it.
Absolutely.
Make other people to want to understand your culture. Make them to be curious. It's a beautiful thing, of course, to be African, but make it, sell it, be an ambassador of it, rather than destroying people using it as a tool. Then you're changing the whole thing. So that's the first part, the change that I've seen there. And I think those are the social cultural norms that I've spoken about that have got spilled over to the workplace. And I'm seeing, because we're driving the D&I behaviors, and I think I'm seeing positive feedbacks with regards to that, because now people can buy in to say, oh, we always thought we are one, those that look for color, black, white, Indian, and all of that, counting us one Indian there, 5 colors and 1 white, all of that. So that is shifted. So these are observable things I'm seeing, and that's the impact of D&I and the reception. And now, I mean, I've been to sessions where when I finish talking about the interventions that we do, the senior executive in that space gives instruction to all these managers and saying, you will attend one of these sessions. You will have your staff attending those. That to me was so fulfilling. I can't believe it. It's just that. So I think those are, so the issue of consent is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with, because people are saying, but you're wanting us to do these things outside our will, and we want to be inclusive. You're forcing this thing to us.
No.
So you've got an option. Do it because it's the right thing to do. So I think those are the things. So I think that's an observation. And as I said, the underlying factor is social cultural upbringing versus workplace culture. The unifier being the values. And now in this case, I saw that driving it from the values point of view gives you the backing, and then you can move forward with any other thing that you do. So those are the observable things that I'm seeing currently.
I know in my case, what I went and I did was I actually looked at some of the board of directors for different organizations that I previously knew to be very lily white and to also be very male dominated. And it was refreshing actually this week as I was going and checking, because I noticed that some of them had started to include non-executive directors from different industries, people who looked different obviously, but they were also not from that particular industry. And these people were sitting at an advisory level. They were sitting at a level where they were able to give input and different perspectives. And I thought, wow, we've come a long way from having boardrooms that were only mainly white male to now having women and having people of color, but also having people who are from different walks of life who bring a different essence to the conversations.
Yeah.
You know.
Very important what you say.
Mm.
I had a conversation with another senior executive who actually literally called me in the morning and said, called all his, her directors and executives that reported to her. And because, and I was once in a session with the Commissioner of Employment Equity actually, who said we should stop reducing people to numbers
Yes.
and color.
Yes.
And because organizations are used to stats, they think because you've got a black and a white, oh, we are okay, we're good. That executive, to show the buy-in that you're talking about, said to me, but Amo, and I'll make an example about you, to say, but in your team, give the stats that we're looking good as a branch, as a department. How does your team look like?
Yes.
And when you made that shortlist and that appointment, what did you look at? No, I looked at the branch, at the departmental stats. And then he said, oh, then you thought it's not important for you in your team to have diversity. You only reduced diversity to numbers. So that's the mind shift. To say, let's not reduce people into numbers and color. Let's reduce people into the right thing to do is to have a diverse team.
Different dimensions.
And the abilities and everything.
Yeah, and the differences that make them unique.
Unique. Yeah. So those are some of the mind shifts that I'm observing, which I'm proud of in the space that I've been and seeing it changing from numbers and color to doing because it's the right thing to do.
And so as we start to wrap up this conversation, I have a couple of phrases that we normally go through. and I'd be very interested to hear what your thoughts are. So I just put a phrase out and you complete it with whatever comes to mind, whatever that truth is for you, whatever it is that you want to share. And I picked this one because I knew that we normally default to a particular ending of this, because I'd like to hear a very different, to see how diversified our thinking is. So I'd like to hear a very different way of approaching this. So the first one is, it takes a village to, and please complete the sentence for us.
Shall I go? So it takes a village to come together to create a vibrant tapestry of human experiences where everybody can feel seen, heard, and respected.
That is a quotable moment. So I'm so going to quote that.
Because now I'm going to go to default to my traditional social cultural way of explaining that. Because I'm told, and it is like that, to say it takes a village to raise a child. And then that's the aspects that you've raised, that you've spoken about, are embedded in that. The tapestry. So you've just spoken to say it takes a village to take all of that and start afresh to a child until they're grown up.
And so Betty, they would say, Kila Kaleo. Me too. That's mine. That's mine too. I'll claim that. And then the second one that you need to complete for me is DEMI is. Well, I'll be passing the baton.
DEMI is understanding that our strengths, our differences are our strengths.
For me, DNI is who we are.
Those are quotable. I am so quotable. You have no idea. I'll be like, and we're obviously saying it's who we are. Because it really is who we are. I mean, if you look at the amount of the different tribes and cultures that we have just in South Africa, it's who we are. It really is.
Oh, we're not talking about that. It's amazing how to live in this beautiful country. This diversity.
That is
Absolutely.
I had a friend who worked in Russia who once said when he was in a bath, there's this little child who's Russian who came to him as a dark complexion and he like he rubbed the feet, maybe put some oil, some dead
that needs to come off.
That needs to come off. This was only one out in that bus, as dark as ever. So I said, well, I don't want to exchange this country for anything.
With all its great stuff and not so great stuff. And then finally, as we start to close off, A missed opportunity where DE&I is concerned is.
I think a missed opportunity when DEI is concerned is that we think that the work and the journey is hard when it can literally start with us. It could start with the next engagement. It could start with, it's the starfish analogy. It's knowing that there's millions of starfish there and you're not going to save them all, but there's one that you can make a difference to. And so a missed opportunity is being sure that you are bringing in the voices to feel seen, heard, and respected. You're bringing the voices around the table that is not represented. And it can start with your engagement. Who am I having coffee with? Who am I connecting with? It doesn't need to be this big corporate culture overhaul. It starts with me. Yeah.
And then it spreads out.
And then it spreads out. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And from a business point of view, for me, just say it again, that sentence.
A missed opportunity where DE&I is concerned is
a missed opportunity of innovation and competitiveness of your business.
Oh yeah.
That's what it is to me. Because we operate in a world that is highly competitive and it needs a diverse pool of innovative thinkers, which are going to be able to drive our society and everything that we do to higher levels. Yeah, so that's for me, is a missed innovation and is a missed competitiveness. You miss those two. Then once you miss those two as a business, then you are mostly out of this, out of the business space.
No, innovation is definitely one of the key skills in this fourth IR that we're operating in. And so I'd like for you to share where people can get in touch and connect with you. I know some people are looking down because they know. So where can people get hold of you on different platforms? Please share your handles. Maybe they'd like to continue the conversation. Maybe they'd like to pick your brain on something. Maybe they'd like to share some thoughts with you. Where can they get hold of you?
So I can be found on LinkedIn, Lana Jackson. That's my channel.
Same as me, I keep it like that. Monwabi Singh comment on that. Exactly what you're hearing about today is what you'll get on my LinkedIn. And that's how you get hold of me. That's where I grow my professional space and my career space. Monwabi is my real name and my surname is Commentada. It will not change. There's no short for it. There's no, it's just like that. Thank you. So LinkedIn is where you'll find me.
I just want to say once again, thank you both so much for coming and having this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed having both of you here, just being able to tap into that knowledge and wisdom that you sit with and knowing that you're taking this out there and sharing it with the rest of the country and the rest of the world, because we do want to go global, just putting it out there. So thank you both so much. And so just in closing, we spoke about diversity, equity, and inclusion today and celebrating Heritage Month. Let's continue to be the change that we want to see. And more importantly, be sure to join us next month on the 10th of October as we speak to two very interesting and diverse leaders who will be talking about building long careers within their different sectors. And having said that, remember that this is a platform where African leaders come to be enriched. Africa. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you
both so much.
Are we offline?
Not yet. And to all our online viewers, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us. Please note that the recording will be made available on our channel. If you're not already following us, please follow and subscribe. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on other themes and things that we can cover on the channel. Thank you both so much. Good night.
Bye-bye.
I should have done answer that you.